Whether you're renting or buying, the process of moving typically isn't going to be simple. Aside from packing and doing all of the heavy lifting, first, you have to find a place that's going to feel right to call your home. Whether you're scrolling online listings or visiting in person, ideally, you're going to want to see the home before moving in, which means touring properties until you find the perfect fit. As you walk the hallways of these unfamiliar places and picture your belongings inside the rooms, understandably, you inspect each room as you go. And if you're actually buying a house before finalizing the purchase, inspectors are required to do a walkthrough of the property and look at every nook and cranny. Once the inspectors are finished and the property is safe to live in, you sign the final paperwork and get the keys to your house. Congratulations. At this point, it's not only a relief that everything's done, but it's also exciting. You can now officially call the place home. However, not so fast. What happens if you get the keys, move in, and you realize that the realtor forgot to tell you something about the home? Something that was pretty important, and it was something that would have been almost impossible to find in an inspection yourself. The unfamiliar hallways that you had been walking in, and the rooms that you had been picturing all of your belongings in, unfortunately, hold quite the little secret. You see, the place that you were so ready to call home is already occupied, but not by the living, but by the dead. What would you do if you found out that your newly purchased home was the neighborhood haunted house? Would you still move in? Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Criminally Focused. My name is Desiree, and whether you're new to my channel or you're a returning OG, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I truly appreciate your support, and I'm happy that you found me. Since Halloween is coming up, the past couple of weeks, I've just been scrolling through my phone, trying to figure out which haunted house I want to go to this year. Actually, shout out to my favorite haunted house in the Denver metro area, the Frightmare Compound. If you're ever in Denver during, Halloween, I would highly recommend checking it out. But I think my favorite haunted house of all time that I've ever been to was actually in Milwaukee. It's called the Mars Haunted House. It has since closed, sadly, but I went there back in the day with my cousins, and I literally don't think I've laughed so hard since. But for my fellow haunted house lovers, answer me this. If the home in question that was haunted was yours, and the haunting was happening to your family, would you be as interested in experiencing it? Many people believe that haunted houses are just urban legends. However, the case that we're talking about today is real, and it begins in 1960s when a family in New York purchased an abandoned Victorian home. The home was beautiful. However, the purchase would not only end up changing their lives, but also New York laws forever. Because in 1990, the New York State Supreme Court ruled that it was a matter of law that the home was declared legally haunted. Today, we're going to be talking about what is now called the Ackley home, the only legally haunted house in America. So we've got a lot to cover. Sit back, maybe dim the lights, grab whatever you're drinking or smoking, get comfy, and let's get right into it.
Hello?
The Ackley home is located at 1 Levita Place in Nyack, New York, and it was built sometime in 1890. They don't really know too much about the early history of the home. Some sources I read said that it was used as a boarding home for multiple residents, and then others said it was just used as a single family home. I have a feeling it was probably used as both throughout the years. But if we pull up a map, you can see that it's about 15 miles from Manhattan. This area of New York specifically is no stranger to hauntings. It's actually pretty familiar with them. It's referenced in books such as The Legends of Sleepy Hollow as being incredibly haunted. And then you have famous historians and ghost hunters claiming that it's the most haunted place on earth. New York even has something called the Haunted History Trail of New York State, which has over 80 different haunted attractions and literally spans throughout the entire state of New York. And I think I could have made a video just on the haunted history of New York. However, today we're just going to focus on one family. In 1967, the Ackley family first purchased their home. Prior to the move, Helen and George Ackley and their 4 kids were just living on a farm in Maryland. However, when George's job required them to move to New York, they bought a beautiful old Victorian mansion. The home had been abandoned for around 7 years, so you can kind of picture in your head. The lawn was overgrown and the roof needed replacement, and overall, the house just really needed some TLC. But it was still absolutely stunning and massive. Spanning 4,600 square feet, the home featured 18 rooms, which included 5 beds and 5 baths, a 3-car garage, a sunroom, and a saltwater pool looking over the Hudson River. I mean, dream house, right? Helen said as soon as she walked into the house, she knew that she had to have it. After they purchased a home, George moved in immediately so he could be closer to work. Helen, however, would travel like back and forth from Maryland to Nyack, trying to get one home ready to sell and then the other one ready to move into. And according to Helen, one afternoon while she was at the new house, a few of the neighborhood kids that had been playing basketball just stopped and walked over to her to say hi. They were curious if Helen had bought the home and if she had any kids, that would be moving in with her. While they were talking, the kids were just kind of looking around, and Helen said that they looked curious, like they wanted to go inside and take a look around. So, being nice, she invited them on in. I know this was back in the 60s, but even then, that probably wasn't the smartest or the safest idea. Obviously, nothing happened to the kids, but I don't think it's the safest to invite kids into your home that you don't know or to go into a home of a stranger. So some of the kids stood back and some of them went, into the house to take a look. But the group that stayed back had a little girl in it. And she just looked up at Helen and kind of laughed and said the rest of the kids were afraid to go into the house because they were afraid of seeing the ghosts. And then she proceeded to ask Helen if she knew that she had bought a haunted house. So Helen just laughed and just kind of brushed it off, thinking like the kids, were just being silly. Until later, when she spoke with a plumber who had been there, all day doing work on the home. Before he left, he asked Helen how long, she planned on being in the home, and she said she was staying until 4:30 so she could go get George from work. The plumber went on to explain that earlier in the day, he kept hearing the sounds of, somebody walking upstairs and somebody walking like up and down the staircase. He said that he checked all over, like multiple times, and he couldn't find anyone else in the house. So he was just a little like apprehensive about leaving Helen there alone. Later that night, Helen and George were just laying in bed before falling asleep, kind of talking about their day. Helen told him about the conversation that she had with the kids and the plumber. However, she said that he didn't really have much of a response. He just got a really weird look on his face. And then she noticed that the hallway light outside of their bedroom was still on. She got up to turn it off, and when she went to turn it off, George told her to keep the light on. She kind of laughed and asked him, since when do you sleep with a nightlight on? And his response was, since moving into this house. And then he just rolled over and went to bed. I don't know if I would have let my husband, just leave it at that. I would have needed him to elaborate just a little bit more on that. As the months passed, the Ackley family members each began having experiences that solidified to them that, their house was haunted. Things started kind of slowly with just lamp cords moving by themselves in like a windless room, or windows and doors actually like opening by themselves. So they were just little things that could be explainable and easy to write off. However, as you guessed, things wouldn't stay that way. Soon, every morning, when Helen and George, were waking up to start their day, they would notice that their daughter, Cynthia, would already be awake and ready for school, before anyone in the house would even wake up. So when they asked her, why are you waking up so early? She said that, her bed just simply wouldn't let her sleep in. Apparently, after moving in, at some point, her bed had started acting basically like an alarm clock. Every morning, at the same time, her bed would start to, gently shake itself. And if she didn't wake up, it would start shaking harder. She believed that the shaking might have come from a spirit or ghost that she saw that was in the form of a thin hooded woman. When Christmas break came that year, apparently she just mentioned out loud, hey, I don't have to wake up for school. I'd like to sleep in hopes that the bed would stop shaking. And it did. But this isn't something that Cynthia alone would experience, as it happened to all of the Ackley kids. Well, okay, all of them but one. I guess the youngest didn't have a problem waking up and was always waking up on time, so there was really no need for it the bed to start shaking. And part of me wonders if she just learned from her older siblings. I think I would have. I think just the thought of a ghost waking me up would have got my ass out of bed so fast. After they moved into the new house, George traveled frequently for work, so Helen would find herself staying up late at night, reading, or just looking at the views of the river through their window. Apparently, one night while she was doing this, she says that she felt a presence behind her. She said that all of her hairs on the back of her neck were standing up, and she could just feel it, that there was somebody else in the room with her. However, when she looked, nobody was standing there. Rather than freak out, she just said to whoever could potentially be there, "It's beautiful on the river, isn't it?" And then after looking at the view for a few more minutes, she said when she turned to leave the room, it felt like the presence was following her out. So she just stopped at the door, said thank you for enjoying the view with her, and told the spirit goodnight. Seriously, Helen is such a badass. As the years went on, the Ackley family members... Oh no, it's not 12. Oh, shit. That was crazy. That thing jumped on me.
We now return to our regularly scheduled programming.
But, it wasn't just the Ackleys that experienced the unexplainable while inside the home. One night while visiting, Helen's cousin was sleeping in the guest room, and she said she was woken up by a ghostly figure of a man standing in her room. She said that he was wearing Revolutionary War clothes and just walked up to her bed, the end of it, sat down, pulled out a book and started reading it. But after he was done reading whatever he needed to read, he just closed the book, got up, and vanished. As the years went on, the Ackley family members each dealt with the hauntings in their own way. Helen had learned to accept and kind of welcome them. George nailed the windows closed, and Cynthia, their oldest, would just quietly close the windows and doors if she noticed them open. These ghosts eventually just became somewhat part of the family. I guess when Cynthia's future husband first visited the house, he said he experienced definitely some weird feelings and kind of felt like he was being watched and judged by the ghost, to see if he was good enough for Cynthia. Apparently, he saw this apparition of a spirit that looked very similar to the one that Cynthia had said used to shake her bed, a thin, hooded woman. And he said that he would wake up sometimes and just see her looking at him. And it was almost like they were watching to see if they approved of him dating Cynthia. Well, when they got married, a set of silver tongs that nobody had ever seen appeared in the house just randomly. Helen actually said that when Cynthia's first child was born, which was Helen and George's first granddaughter, during her baptism, they, I guess, tried to tie a ring that she was given to her finger because they didn't want it to, fall off in the water when she was being baptized. But when they got home, they found a perfect baby-sized ring just sitting on the kitchen table, almost as if the ghosts had been giving them a gift in celebration. Cynthia's daughter still wears that ring around her neck to this day. I thought that was a pretty cool story. While the Ackleys lived in the house, their style preference changed and different renovations were done to make the house feel more personalized. One of these renovations was to paint the living room, which I guess had been originally painted a dull gray color, and Helen just wanted to brighten the room up a bit. So while she was on the ladder painting the wall, I guess she felt that familiar feeling of a presence being behind her watching her. But when she looked around the first time, she didn't see anything and just continued on painting the wall. However, that feeling of being watched didn't go away. So out loud, she made a comment that she hoped presence liked the changes that they were making to the house. When she turned around to look again, she saw him, an apparition of a round old man that was watching her with a smile on his face. She said the man had white hair that framed his face and beautiful, piercing blue eyes. And she described the apparition in so much detail, it's crazy to me. She said he was wearing a light blue suit, unbuttoned with sleeves that were rolled up and, like ruffly. She said his pants were cut off at the kneecaps and he wore shiny black shoes with buckles. Can you imagine that if you turned around and saw like a smiling old man floating in the air looking at you? In the article in Reader's Digest, written in 1977, Helen wrote, "These elusive spirits seem gracious, thoughtful, only occasionally frightening, and thoroughly entertaining. Now we wonder if the time comes for us to move again. Is there any way we can take our otherworldly friends with us?" Although not looking forward to leaving her ghostly companions, Helen Ackley did put their home up for sale in 1989. And I think at this point, sadly, I don't think George Ackley was alive anymore. I was reading on, Wikipedia. I don't know how reliable that source is, but I did read that he passed away. So I believe at this point, when the lawsuit begins, it's only Helen Ackley and her realtor that are involved. But according to Cynthia's husband, who has written about their experiences online, the taxes on the house were just getting high, and Helen wanted to move to someplace warmer, maybe like Florida or Texas. The house sat on the market for, a little while. However, it did end up selling to a couple named Jeffrey and Patrice Stambosky. Stambosky's bought the home for $650,000 and they paid a $32,000 deposit. And there's a couple different stories of how they actually found out that the home that they just purchased was the neighborhood haunted house. According to an article that Cynthia's husband actually linked on his page online, it's called Ex Ghost Facto. They found out that the home was haunted by an architect who, kind of like the kids that ran up to Helen and asked if she knew that she was moving into a haunted house. He basically did the same. And then you have other sources that claim that Helen and her real estate agent told the Stamboskis all about the hauntings before they would sign any type of contract. Either way, the Stamboskis were upset. Jeffrey Stambosky allegedly was upset because he believed that the resale value of the home would be lower if it was known as being a haunted house. And allegedly, his poor wife Patrice was so scared of ghosts that she wouldn't even go inside the house once she found out it was haunted. So they told the Ackleys that they weren't interested anymore in buying the house and requested that their $32,000 deposit be returned to them. However, as you can imagine, Helen and her realtor refused to give the money back, which led the Stamboskis to get legal counsel and take them to court. So now, here we go, guys. If you were waiting for me to get to the legal part of the story, like the legal issues, this is where it all begins. So the judge ended up ruling in the Ackley's favor at first. He cited a New York law called caveat emptor, which is also referred to as the buyer beware law. Under caveat emptor, it's the responsibility of a buyer to, research the property and ask the right questions to the seller. Basically, purchase at your own risk, meaning that the buyers, or in our case, the Stamboskis, it was their responsibility to ask the right questions and not the sellers or the Ackley's responsibility to disclose information that wasn't asked. Now, I don't know, this just seems incredibly dishonest to me. But whatever, it was the law, or it is the law. So the judge ruled that even though the Stamboskis inspected the home, if their inspections missed the fact that the house was haunted, then, that was on them. But despite the judge's ruling, the Stamboskis didn't stop. No, they took their battle all the way to the New York State Supreme Court. So the Athletes believed that regardless of a haunting, a contract was a contract and it had been signed and was valid. The Stamboskis, however, said that despite the buyer beware laws that existed, a seller of a home should have to disclose something that's not easily figured out by a buyer. Like, unless they paid a psychic or a medium to come into the house and basically walk along with the inspectors, how would they ever have known? After both sides pled their cases in a very narrow 2-3 win, the court this time ruled in favor of the Stamboskis. The courts decided that when dealing with a haunting, it wasn't exactly easy, like I just said, for a home inspection to pick up the signs, meaning that the buyers would have had a hard time finding out the correct questions to ask prior to purchasing the home.
You have found your dream home. I can't wait. You and your family, no more searching. We have a spacious 6-bedroom house. 6 bedrooms? 6 bedrooms. You said you got like 3 or 4 kids. Yeah, I have 3 babies. So the house we had it listed for $200,000, for you $100,000. $100,000. Look at everything around here. Look. More blood. What the fuck? Get out, bro. Is that a butcher knife and blood? Hey, man, I'm telling you right now that I cut some strawberries right here earlier. No, that ain't no fucking strawberries, bro. That is blood, bro. I know what blood looks like. And I wrote this because it was a prank. And it was on the last, man, that shit was funny. Man, I'll tell you about it later, man. $50,000 for the house now.
And showing kind of a sense of humor, the court actually said something in the documents that gave this case the popular name, the Ghostbuster ruling, referring, to the movie which had recently come out called Ghostbusters. And do you remember that? I was so young when that movie came out.
Ghosts.
Hello, Ghostbusters.
They're real.
You do? You have?
They're here. Ghostbusters.
Hey, anybody see a ghost?
They catch the ghost that won't stay dead.
In the documents, the court said, a very practical problem arises with respect to the discovery of paranormal phenomenon. Who are you going to call? As a title song to the movie Ghostbuster asks. Applying the strict rule, caveat emptor, to a contract involving, a house that's possessed by poltergeists, conjures up visions of a psychic or a medium routinely accompanying the structural engineers and the Terminix man on an inspection of every home, subject to a contract of sale. The courts went on to explain that because a haunting wasn't easily discoverable, it was actually the seller's responsibility to disclose that information. And I guess apparently, despite the fact that Helen, in my opinion, had made it pretty public that the house was haunted, by writing in the Reader's Digest and including it in the neighborhood haunted house tours, apparently she didn't make it public enough, because by not disclosing that the house was haunted in actual writing, Helen lost her case. Because of the ghost tours, the court ruled that the home was officially haunted. Today, New York is one of 4 states that include supernatural activities in their real estate disclosure laws. The others are New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Minnesota. They each have different requirements, but it's still listed on the disclosure forms. Several other states require sellers to tell buyers if there was a death on a property. At least I would want to know that. Don't you think, would you? But the story really doesn't quite end there. What ended up happening with Helen Ackley and her kids? Well, Helen did end up selling their home, and she actually sold it for more than the Stambosky had offered to pay for it. I guess it turns out that having a legally haunted house is pretty cool, and people were all about it. Although it was sad for her to leave, once the home was sold officially, Helen moved to a warmer state like she had wanted to do. Even though she was no longer living in the home, part of her heart never really left. In 1993, Helen was actually contacted by a man named Bill Merrill, who was a paranormal researcher. And he was interested in, touring the home to see what he found out. I guess the new homeowners must have been okay with it, so Bill and a medium met Helen at the house. According to Bill, he did sense spirits in the home, many of them. He said that one ghost called himself Sir George, and the other one called herself Margaret. I think it was Lady Margaret. After doing research, it was discovered that there actually was a Sir George and a Lady Margaret who lived in the area in the 18th century. Weird. That's crazy. Maybe he just did research before he came. In 2003, Helen Ackley passed away, and some of her family members have said that they believe, just like I said, her heart never fully, left the home. Now her spirit has returned as well. So that brings me back to the question that I asked you in the beginning of the video. If you knew a house was haunted, would you still want to buy it? So even though I love haunted houses, I don't know if I'd want to move into one. I don't know, maybe the Ackley House because those ghosts seem pretty cool. Otherwise, I think I'll just stick to visiting the haunted houses every year and then going home to my safe, quiet, non-haunted house. All right, with that said, whether you're watching in October or another time, happy Halloween, guys. Thank you so much for sitting through this video. I really appreciate it. If you've got a second, please hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment in the comment section. Tell me what you're dressing up for Halloween. Tell me what you would do if you moved into a haunted house. I would love to know. But until next time, guys, stay safe, stay spooky, and stay focused. Bye.